Mandubian Plateau, October 2nd, 52 BC. The world is mud and iron. Rain, cold and relentless, turns the churned earth into a greedy mire that sucks at the legionaries' boots. The air, thick with the smell of wet wool, sweat, and fear, carries the rhythmic, percussive clang of 1,000 shovels striking rock. It's the sound of a trap being built. From the hilltop fortress of Alesia, a stone's throw away, the war horns of the Gauls howl like captive wolves, a sound of defiance that does little to mask their desperation. General Gaius Julius Caesar, standing on a wooden watchtower, pulls his woolen cloak tighter. He isn't watching the enemy fortress, he's watching his own men. His legions are building a wall to keep the Gauls in, but they are also building a second, outer wall, a wall to keep an even bigger army out. Hello, my friends. Welcome to the Cosmic Conquerors channel. Before we begin, please subscribe and hit the bell so you don't miss any of our new content. And share this story with friends so it reaches as many people as possible. If you have a story idea, drop it in the comments. Maybe we'll use it in the next video. Let's begin the story. Pay close attention, because there is one small decision made before the dawn that will change the destiny of nations. Our story is about two men, titans of their age, locked in a contest of wills that would decide the fate of a continent. One is Julius Caesar, the proconsul of Gaul, a brilliant, ambitious, and deeply indebted Roman politician whose military genius was matched only by his political ruthlessness. A victory here wouldn't just conquer Gaul, it would give him the power to challenge his rivals, like Pompey the Great, for control of Rome itself. Failure meant financial ruin and political exile. For Caesar, this was all or nothing. His adversary was Vercingetorix, a young chieftain of the Arverni tribe. He had done the impossible, united the fiercely independent and perpetually squabbling Gallic tribes under a single banner. He was charismatic, clever, and had learned from Roman tactics, even handing Caesar a rare defeat at the siege of Gergovia months earlier. Vercingetorix understood that he couldn't beat the legions in a pitched battle. His strategy was one of scorched earth, denying the Romans food and supplies, bleeding them dry far from home.
But after a cavalry engagement went wrong, he made a fateful choice: to retreat with his 80,000 warriors into the formidable hill fort of Alesia, daring Caesar to besiege him while a massive relief army was summoned from all corners of Gaul. Caesar accepted the challenge with an act of military engineering so audacious it bordered on madness. He ordered his legions to construct an 11-mile-long ring of fortifications around Alesia, a wall known as a circumvallation. It was a city of wood and earth, complete with towers, ditches, and terrifyingly clever traps, hidden pits with sharpened stakes called lilia, and rows of sharpened branches called sippi. But Caesar knew the real threat wasn't the 80,000 men trapped with Vercingetorix. It was the hundreds of thousands Vercingetorix had summoned. So he gave a second, insane order: build another wall, a contravallation, 14 miles long, facing outwards. His army of 50,000 Romans was now sandwiched between two colossal fortifications of their own making, a self-imposed prison. They were the besiegers, and soon they would be the besieged. What would you have done in his boots? Would you have risked trapping your own army? The logistical strain was immense. Food was rationed. Every Roman soldier was now a construction worker by day and a sentry by night, their nerves fraying with each passing hour. Inside Alesia, things were worse. Vercingetorix watched his food supplies dwindle. The relief army was taking too long. He made a brutal calculation. To preserve food for his warriors, he expelled the original inhabitants of Alesia, the Mandubii tribe, thousands of men, women, and children. They pleaded at the Roman lines, begging for passage or to be taken as slaves, anything to avoid starvation. Caesar, his own supplies stretched to the breaking point, refused. The Mandubii were left to starve to death in the no-man's land between the fortress and the Roman wall, their cries a constant, haunting reminder of the war's true cost. Then they arrived. a Gallic relief army said to number over 250,000 men, led by Vercingetorix's own cousin, Vercingetorix. The hillsides shimmered with a sea of spears and colorful banners. The Romans were now officially trapped. The sound of Gallic horns now came from both front and back. The trap was set, but it was no longer clear who was the hunter and who was the prey. The assault came with the fury of a storm.
Vercingetorix launched his men from Alesia, trying to break through the inner wall. Simultaneously, the massive relief army threw itself against the outer wall. For 2 days, the fighting was a brutal, hacking, screaming affair. The Romans, outnumbered 5-1, held their lines, their discipline and superior engineering just barely enough. But the Gauls found a weak point, a section of the Roman line built on a steep hill to the north, which was impossible to fully fortify. Vercingetorix gathered 60,000 of his best warriors for a single, decisive push at this spot, coordinated with Vercingetorix's attack from the inside. This was the turning point. Caesar, watching from his command post, saw his northern line begin to buckle under the sheer weight of the Gallic charge. His general, Labienus, was being overwhelmed. The line wavered, then broke. Gallic warriors poured over the ramparts. The battle, and with it the fate of Gaul and Caesar's future, hung by a thread. In that moment of absolute crisis, Caesar made his final gamble. He grabbed his personal standard, put on his famous brilliant red commander's cloak so every man could see him, and personally led his last reserves, a few cohorts of cavalry and infantry, in a desperate, frantic charge straight into the heart of the breach. The sight of their commander, the legendary Caesar, fighting in the front ranks like a common soldier, electrified the exhausted legionaries. They rallied, formed a line around him, and charged. The Gauls, surprised by the sudden, ferocious counterattack from their flank and rear, hesitated. And in battle, hesitation is death. The Gallic assault faltered, broke, and then became a full-blown rout. Here lies the hidden truth of Alesia, the detail often lost to the grandeur of victory. It wasn't just Caesar's genius that won the day. It was his desperation. He had been minutes, perhaps seconds, from total annihilation. His entire strategy, the walls, the siege, had brought him to the very brink of a catastrophe that would have echoed through history. The victory was not a masterstroke of calm strategy, but a bloody, bare-knuckle brawl won by a single leader's willingness to risk everything in one final, insane moment of courage. The grand plan had failed. It was sheer will that saved him. The next day, the gates of Alesia opened. Vercingetorix, dressed in his most magnificent, polished armor, rode out alone. He circled Caesar, who sat on a raised platform, then dismounted, laid his sword and helmet at the Romans' feet, and surrendered without a word. The great Gallic rebellion was over. Vercingetorix would be paraded through Rome in chains years later, then ritually strangled. In the end, it is not the grandest wall that wins a war, but the will of the man who dares to stand behind it when it begins to crumble. As Caesar watched his men count the captured and tend to the dead, a lone courier arrived from the south. He carried dispatches from Rome. The news was not of congratulations, but of political maneuvering. His enemies were not celebrating his victory. They were using his absence to strip him of his power. The war for Gaul was over, but a new shadow was falling across the road to Rome. Who do you think bore the true guilt for the tragedy of the Mandubi tribe? And was Vercingetorix's surrender an act of heroic sacrifice for his people, or the final admission of failure? Tell us what you think. And with that, we've reached the end of the story. But stories don't end here. If you liked this one, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any new stories. And if something caught your attention, leave it in the comments and let's discuss it together. I'll be waiting for your opinions. See you in the next story. Goodbye.